Definitely agree vampires should be scary. They can be sexy too, but they shouldn't sparkle. I'm sorry.
Right.
Brooding and tortured, fine. Sparkling, not fine.
Hi, I'm Julia.
I'm Rachael.
And I'm Kelly.
And this is What You Should Read,
The podcast where we should all over our books.
And it's our spooky episode. I'm going to put some spooky music in there.
Ooh, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Kelly, show us your shirt.
Yeah.
It says books, and there's books and a ghost.
Cute.
This is my favorite time of year.
Yes, Kelly. Kelly, this is your episode. Tell us what today's episode theme is.
Today is our spooky Halloween horror. I almost said horror movie. Horror book episode. I'm so excited. I have been waiting for this since it came up, I think months ago, that we were going to do it. So happy.
I'm a little frightened. I don't read a lot of horror, so I am open to getting recommendations from you and our guest, who we will introduce a little bit later on today. But first, Kelly, what are you reading this week?
I am reading Hoax by Brian Stelter, which is actually for next week's episode. So I don't want to talk too much about it right now, but it is basically how Fox News is directly, or I guess indirectly responsible for Donald Trump as president. So it's really good. And if you have ever thought Fox News has ruined an entire generation, well, it turns out you were right. And he's got a whole bunch of statistics. So excellent. It's very good. And I guess works for this week too. It is a horror nonfiction
that we're currently living through.
Yep.
Yeah, this is actually part one of our 2-part horror episode series. The next one will be Election Day, depending on the outcome.
Yeah. This week is straight horror. Next week is existential horror. So.
Yes, exactly. Oh, gosh. Okay, Rachael, what are you reading this week?
I'm reading The Stand by Stephen King.
Yay!
Which, for those of you who either don't remember or didn't listen to that episode, we did an episode where we proclaimed our top 5 books that we wanted to read by the end of the year. And one of mine was this book, The Stand, and it's the first one on my list that I've started. So I'm not very far into it. It's 1,200 pages. So I'm like 4% of the way through. But it's really good. I probably would be a lot farther into it, but this past week at work has been insane and I haven't been reading a lot. So in general, although I did read Such a Fun Age on my Kindle this week, and it was so good, by Kiley Reid. Oh my gosh, you were right. You both were right. I loved it. So I read that. And my audiobook that I'm reading right now is Akata Witch by Nnedi Okorafor. So
Yay!
It's really, really fun.
Yeah, I love that book.
One of my friends with really good taste in books said I should read it, but I haven't yet. That was you, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I am reading Chasing Alice by Stephanie Fowler. And it's interesting, and I won't go too much into it because we are going to talk about it on an upcoming episode, but it is true crime. And I don't read as much true crime, I think, as the two of you do, but I'm really liking it so far. I'm about a quarter of the way through it. And yeah, Kelly knows the author. We're going to have her on, so I won't go too much into what it's about, but so far really liking it. So that's Chasing Alice by Stephanie L. Fowler.
Okay, we're continuing our 3rd week of way too much book news. I guess honestly I'm gonna start with what is probably maybe not the worst, but the most so Jeffrey Toobin.
Technically an author.
Yes. He is a pundit on CNN and works for the New Yorker, but also has done a lot of nonfiction about Patty Hearst, I know, the O.J. Simpson thing. a bunch of others. He has been suspended from the New Yorker and is on leave from CNN for
exposing himself.
Yeah, and they said at first it was like exposing himself, and he said he thought his video was off and he was on, like on mute. And I thought, well, he's an older gentleman, maybe he had to go to the bathroom and doesn't know how Zoom works. That was not what happened.
Oh.
And he was on a Zoom call with like a bunch of colleagues, which I just feel like I feel so awful for all of them. I can't even imagine.
To do that while you're at work and knowing that there's a chance you would get caught, right? I mean, his excuse is, oh, I thought I was on mute. I thought my video was off. But you have to know there's a certain level of risk. But you do that, and he did it anyway. So it just points to the like, I think I can get away with this because I'm a powerful man, thought process. But it's just like, no. You should be fired. Ugh, so gross. Why do people do this stuff?
I mean, you would think that after the whole Louis C.K. thing, people would just maybe not do this or get consent or something. Also, I don't know if it's legit. I sincerely hope it's not, but one of the people I follow on Twitter, and I forget who it is, had like a still of it, like the Zoom call. And it was like, tag yourself. And they had like all of the reactions. And there's one person who's just basically like, hand all the way over the face. I don't know. I feel like, as someone who has worked in the world, like I feel like we all probably have at least one horror story of people we worked with who maybe were not as professional as we could have hoped. But this is just next level gross.
Yep.
Yeah. Stop it. If you are a man or anyone who is doing something like this or thinking about it, just stop.
Yeah, seriously, just don't. You oh, and what makes the whole thing weirder, apparently it was like a weird sort of conversation about like the debate that was coming up then, and he represented the Supreme Court and like someone was Donald Trump. It was like such a weird thing, and maybe not a turn on, but whatever.
Yeah, well, men.
Well, also bad, but not, horrifying. A bunch of different imprints are closing. Simon & Schuster is closing Simon Pulse. Macmillan is closing their imprint, which is called Imprint. And Hachette is closing its Jimmy Patterson Presents, which is sort of a vanity imprint for James Patterson. And they are getting rid of all Jimmy Patterson Presents authors except for one James Patterson. So they will still publish his young adult and middle grade, but nobody else's.
Yeah, this is really disappointing. Those are 3 imprints that are publishing a lot of great books. And, I think that a lot of the authors that we read and love from those imprints will find a home elsewhere. I think Kay Ankrum is someone whose star is really on the rise. And I certainly hope that her books continue to thrive under a different imprint, whether it's under the Macmillan umbrella. I have no idea what's happening. L.L. McKinney, I think, is another author who was under that same imprint. There, the list goes on and on. There's so many great authors, but there are some that are not as widely read or well known who might struggle to get their books picked up elsewhere, and even more than that, the people that work at those imprints, in editorial, in marketing and publicity. I just feel so bad that they've lost what sounds like it was a great job too. Everyone speaks very, very highly, especially of Macmillan imprint. I've been seeing a lot of great things about the people who work there. So best of luck to all of them. It's really sad. This happens in publishing way too often, and it's always tough.
Yeah. But I do have one happy bit of news. So next year, Ruth Bader Ginsburg has a book coming out, and it sounds like it's a memoir, and it's called Justice, Justice, Thou Shalt Prevail, A Life's Work Fighting for a More Perfect Union. And I don't think it has an official release date yet, but I'm so happy. And like everyone pretty much, I was devastated at her death, both because of who she is and what she represented, but also, you know, this is maybe not the best time for the Supreme Court vacancy. So just getting to spend more time with her as an inspiration, I'm really happy for it.
When is it coming out?
We don't know, just next year.
Nice.
Hopefully early, but I don't know.
Right.
Did she write it knowing she wanted it published after her death posthumously?
I don't know. The fact that it wasn't announced until after she died makes me think maybe yes, but then at the same time, you know, we don't necessarily know about books by famous people too far in advance. Like we didn't find out about Barack Obama's book all that long ago.
Right.
And that's out in a couple weeks too, so
I imagine she wanted to wait until she was at least off the Supreme Court. You know, I'm sure ideally she would have liked Joe Biden to get elected, and then she could step down and he could replace her on the court so that the woman could have gotten a rest.
yeah.
But she held on until the end, which we thank her for. So I'm guessing she probably wanted to wait to publish it until after, because I'm sure as a judge, she would have not wanted to have a book out there while she's still serving. That would be my guess, but
I would agree.
Can't wait to read it.
Yeah. Most anticipated 2021 releases, that tops it for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right, so we are going to have some fun and do our original flagship segment, You Know What You Should Read. So later on, our main, theme of the show is going to be horror books, and Kelly has a lot of what you should read suggestions. So Julia and I are going to kind of take the handle on this one. So Julia, what should we read?
Okay, I know I've talked about this series, but I don't know that I've ever officially recommended it in an official capacity. So I'm just going to do it. You know what you should read? Every Heart a Doorway by Seanan McGuire. This is the first in her Wayward Children series. And maybe I have recommended this officially. Maybe I haven't. I can't remember. I don't care. I am going to recommend it anyway because I just finished Come Tumbling Down, which is book 5, and it was on my fall TBR list. I'm officially not a cheatie, if you remember our rating system.
Oh, dip.
I'm adjacent at the moment. But Eleanor West's Home for Wayward Children. There are only 3 rules: no solicitations, no visitors, no quests. Now that last rule gets broken pretty much all the time because this is a school for kids who have found a doorway into another world. Mm-hmm. And every book kind of dives into a different world, and they do so because these quests just keep happening. They have to go on these quests to help each other. Something's going wrong. And they're all trying to get back to their world, which is where they really belong. Mm-hmm. And this school is basically like a school for these wayward children, misfit children, who are heroes and belong in a special world and are trying to get back there. But they're really short books. They're really just like, oh, they're so good. If you grew up reading the Chronicles of Narnia or Harry Potter, you will get the same feeling from these books. They're just a little bit more grown up. They're not really YA, even though the main characters are teenagers, but they are written, I think, for an adult audience. But they're really great. So yeah, Every Heart a Doorway by Seanan McGuire.
I really want to read those books.
Do it. You will love them, Rach. And they're short. They're like 200 pages each, sometimes way less than that.
Send them to me. I'll pay back the money.
Okay.
Shipping costs.
You can borrow them.
Okay. All right. So, my recommendation. You know what you should read? Is Hench by Natalie, Zina, Walschots. So Hench is a really funny book. It was just published not too long ago, September 22nd. And the main character, her name is Anna, or Anna, I think. And so Anna works as what is called a hench. So in this world, superheroes and supervillains exist, but this is not they're not the main characters of the book. The book's main characters are the part of the endless amount of hench people that work for the supervillains, because even evil people need paperwork and taxes done. So
she's like the admin to this villain.
Exactly. She does like data entry. She does a lot of spreadsheets. And she's got to make a living somehow, right? So she's not necessarily evil. She's just doing what she's got to do to make her rent. And so it's the reason I'm laughing so much is because the book is just the premise is so funny. Everything that happens is so great, like in a satirical way, but also it is a really interesting and kind of dark and thoughtful book. So Anna is, she works for this temp agency that, sends temps to evil villains for whatever things they need. And she doesn't think she has any, so what they do is in like 5th grade or something, they test all the kids for whether or not they have superpowers. And so she never tested for any. So that's why she does kind of the menial jobs. But she has friends that are like, either super smellers, so they can, detect poisons and bombs and things, or whatever. They might be super strong. So they're part of they call them the meat, which is the bodyguards and things. But she just gets this job with this supervillain through the temp agency, just, doing spreadsheets, but she ends up kind of getting a little bit promoted, and she is suddenly thrust into this. It's like she's told it's a press conference. What it actually is the evil villain is hacking into the city council's chambers on their video screen and ransoming the mayor's son for something. And what happens is the main superhero of the world, think Superman, comes and quote saves the day, and she ends up with this huge injury. Even though she's just there standing in the background, she is so badly injured. She's laid up for months. She has all these medical bills she can't pay. So she starts this blog basically tallying the cost of all the damage that superheroes cause. And cost to life and limb, cost to property damage, and all this stuff. And it sends her, this is all in the beginning, and that blog sends her on this just whirlwind adventure. She gets a job with a new supervillain. She starts this whole project. I won't get into it because it's just so fabulous. I think you both really like it. It definitely especially reminds me of the kind of thing that Julia would love to read. But honestly, I think everybody should read it. It's so good. So that
sounds.
Yeah.
Who's the author?
Natalie. Oh, let me look. Natalie, Zina, Walschots.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's been on my radar. I was going to try to listen to the audiobook, but I started it and I wasn't really connecting with the narrator, I think. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to see if I can get it from the library, because it does sound kind of up my alley. Even though superhero stuff isn't always up my alley, but I loved Nimona. Have you
Oh,
guys? Yeah, Rachel, I think you gave me that, or I borrowed it from you, and I loved that. So yeah,
I think you would like this, especially because it's mostly sort of a satire.
yeah,
And really the setting for just a commentary on, what makes someone good or bad in the
yeah.
eyes of like the press, or, how are people sort of conditioned to view who's good and who's bad.
Yeah.
It was really interesting.
Great. Speaking of good and evil, particularly evil, it's our horror episode. So we are going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll be joined by horror fan and author Emma Beaven to talk about the horror genre and recommend some good books for just getting the shit scared out of you, I guess. So stick around and we'll be right back. And we are back, and we are joined today by Emma Beaven, who is an author and horror book fan. So welcome to the podcast, Emma.
Thank you.
So we are talking horror books today because it's Halloween season, and I'm just curious, like, what's your history with reading horror? Have you been a horror fan for a long time? Is it your favorite genre?
So, horror has been my favorite genre really since I was a little girl. When I was actually pretty young, like around 5 years old, I used to read Andersen's fairy tales. And the one story I really liked was the red shoes, where the girl puts the red shoes on, she can't stop dancing, and it ends up a woodcutter has to cut her feet off, and the shoes dance away. And I don't know, I've always been fascinated with her.
Yeah, what do you think it is about it that is so fascinating to you, or it really captures you?
Well, for one, it's definitely an escapist fantasy, which I know it tends toward the dark, and often we more, I guess, so think of sort of like fantasy and like Tolkien and things like that, but it is also escapist. I would say that it makes me feel calm. I have a lot of anxiety issues, and when I am watching horror, reading horror, I feel calm, I feel focused, I feel like I know what's going on. And it's just, I like the thrill of being scared.
That is so interesting that it actually calms your anxiety. And I just can't imagine, because to me, I watch a horror movie or I'm reading something scary and I feel like I'm on edge. But Kelly, you were saying you've read studies that say kind of the same thing, right?
Yeah, it's weird because like you said, it does seem like it would be counterintuitive. But yeah, like it really helps with anxiety. And I bet Emma can back this up too. If you watch a lot of horror movies, most of the time you know exactly what's going to happen, even if it's the first time. I watched a thriller with our friend Philip, and he got very annoyed because he had already seen it and I was calling everything. Like, oh, it's been about 10 minutes, 15 minutes since something happened. So something's going to happen soon. And probably the guy is going to come in from like right over there. And it did. So even if it's the first time, yeah, like you can kind of call everything and it helps, I think. So
I guess there's a formula in a lot of horror, would you say? Or maybe not a formula, but you have certain expectations that, oh, here's Fergie. You have a lot of expectations that are typically met in horror. Like, it's going to be horrifying.
Certainly. I'm a big fan of atmospheric horror because feel like you can really sink into another world there. So for instance, like it's probably easiest to demonstrate this movie wise. I know we're talking about books, but for instance, the movie The Witch, with the atmosphere that was just so palpable, so overwhelming, I felt like I could be there and not here, sort of in the present.
Wow. So tell us about your book. Is it atmospheric in that way?
Okay, so I tried to make it so I have always been a huge fan of gothic romance. So I love the big spooky houses, the secrets, the some poor young girl who has to figure out what's going on before it's too late. Uh, so my book is definitely a gothic romance. It takes place at the beginning of the 19th century in Maryland, just because I'm familiar with Maryland, and I tried to make it very atmospheric, heavy, descriptions of the house, including lots of elements of the weather, because I feel like that really contributes. Like, it takes place in a very, very hot, sort of overwhelming summer. And for some reason, I've always associated summer with ghosts. I can't really tell you why, but yeah, it's something about like how heavy the atmosphere is. So I tried to create a world where it's very heavy. There, you're sort of stuck in this miserable heat, and there's no way out. I'm hoping that people will be able to sort of jump into that world and really feel like they're there.
Oh, that sounds great. Can you tell us the title?
Oh, yes, it's called Where the Briars Sleep.
Great. And that's coming out in July 2021?
Yes, it is. Yes.
Okay, great. We'll have to have you back on when it comes out so we can read it. I'm building up to reading more horror. So by then I should be ready.
Okay.
I'll definitely read it first, and maybe I can be like, maybe skip this page because it's super scary. Here's what you've missed.
That was going to be my other question, Emma. When you're writing, do you ever frighten yourself? Or, I mean, since horror is kind of calming for you, maybe it's the opposite.
I would say occasionally when I'm sort of really, really lost in my stories and I'm sort of exploring. I mean, I write what scares me as well. So definitely I've been kind of lost in writing this sort of like haunted house book type things and felt sort of chilled, where I'm kind of looking around. I walk through the dark house at night and I'm like, I don't know. For the most part, I would say when I'm writing, I'm not terribly scared. It's more when I'm thinking about it, thinking about the plot, imagining the world, trying to come up with more ideas. And it's definitely the haunted house piece that freaks me out.
Yeah. Ugh. Do you have writers that influence you the most?
As I said, gothic romance has always been my thing. So one of the authors that I like, well, I guess this is a little bit later. One of my favorite authors is M.R. James. So he writes the weird, creepy, pseudo-religious stuff. He was a religious scholar. So there's demons, ghosts, curses, all this terrible stuff from the past. And his pieces were very, very atmospheric. I'd also like to mention Elizabeth Gaskell, The Old Nurse's Tale, which is probably like my favorite gothic romance story ever. There definitely it's with the haunted atmosphere, the ghosts of sins past.
Yeah. Ooh, I like the sound of religious horror, like bringing in those elements. That's interesting to me.
Yeah, it's definitely my favorite. I mean, the thing is, I don't like things that are overly pushing a religion, but I do appreciate sort of the setting and the idea of, sort of ancient traditions and, the ghosts and demons that come with that.
Right.
Yeah, for sure.
Great. So in reading horror or even writing horror, are there certain like trends, or I guess they would call it tropes, that you're into that you wish there were more of, or are there ones that you wish would just go away?
Okay, well, I'm a big fan of traditional haunted house stories, so I don't want those ever to go away. I know people get tired of them. I absolutely love it. One thing that I would say I don't like are non-scary vampires. That's always been something that's really irked me because it's supposed to be something terrifying, something that's sucking the life out of you, feeding off your life. And I can't stand the idea of, romantic, happy, save the world type vampires. I want, all the dark, dragging you into the ground kind of vampires.
No, but they're just misunderstood. He's just a misunderstood vampire, Emma. He's really good.
Yeah, I really don't like any, horror tradition, sort of horror monsters that are made sort of nice and happy and good. Anything like that just really irks me.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, like with your book, I love it when the setting is just as much of a character as the actual people. Like, yes, give me all the haunted houses, give me like all the creepy places. I want a really scary werewolf movie, and we haven't had one in a long time. I don't even, and I mean, I know, again, we're talking about books, but yeah, like a scary werewolf book would be fine too. I would take that. Definitely agree, vampires should be scary. They can be sexy too, but they shouldn't sparkle. I'm sorry.
Right.
Brooding and tortured, fine. Sparkling, not fine. Yes. But and Riley Sager's most recent book was a good haunted house one.
Oh yeah, I have that on my shelf. My mom let me borrow it.
Lock every door, right?
Home Before Dark.
Home Before Dark, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, Lock Every Door is good too, though. It's this young woman, and she gets a job house sitting in an apartment building, and it's just like the weirdest, creepiest place. And they have all these rules, like you can't have guests, you can't do this or that. I haven't read it in a long time, but yeah, spooky places, definitely here for it.
Check that out. I think those titles sound familiar to me, like I may have been looking at the summaries and hadn't bought the book yet, but I'll definitely have to check that out.
So fun. And oh gosh, the one that he has coming out next year, it's something like there is a driver who picks up a hitchhiker. One of them is a serial killer.
We don't know which one.
We don't know which. I'm guessing it would probably be the hitchhiker because otherwise too obvious. But yeah,
I don't
not
know.
going well for someone.
Yeah.
I can't wait to not know who it is until the very end. I'm really bad at guessing endings in those kinds of books. I'm always just like, I let the book guide me, and I'm like, okay, I believe you. This is what it is. And then it's not, and I'm like, what?
Yes, I'm very easily swayed back and forth. Like I'll be like one chapter, I'm like, oh, it's definitely this guy. Oh no, it's definitely him.
So Kelly, you had mentioned horror movies too. So what are some of Emma and Kelly? What are some of your favorite either book to screen or screen to book horror adaptations?
I had to go with The Exorcist. It's a spooky book. It's a terrifying movie. I absolutely love The Exorcist. It's my all-time scary movie. I wouldn't say it's my all-time scary book, even though it is a scary book, but it's definitely my all-time scary movie.
I didn't even know it was a book.
Yeah.
I gotta admit. Okay.
Too scary.
I would absolutely co-sign. I'm not a religious person. I don't believe in demons. I don't believe in possession. Religious horror, I don't know what it is. It freaks me out on a very visceral level. And for that reason, I think I go seeking it out. But The Exorcist, I can only watch it during the daytime and only once every like 5-ish years. So I guess I'm due, but I'm scared. But Superfast, I don't think they could make that movie today though, do you? Because it's very kind of, the pacing is deliberate. It's not slow, it's not boring, but nothing really happens for the first hour. You just sort of see Regan behaving weirder and weirder, and the mom trying to figure out what's going on, and like all of these potential explanations are being closed off. But I don't think audiences today would have the patience for all of that.
I definitely think some viewers of horror wouldn't. I want to recommend to you, I know this is book again, but movie-wise, in the similar vein to The Exorcist, The Possession of Michael King. So that's just a few years old. And that is sort of, again, weird things that are starting to, it's low budget, found footage, so good though. Like for found footage, my top 5.
Nice.
I would agree. That movie was so much better than it had any right to be. Just absolutely captivating. I loved it.
Okay, yeah. So I mean, that was just sort of showing you little bits. I thought that the build was really good and really creepy. I guess I definitely see what you're talking about with The Exorcist, with just the sort of slow little bits. And I really miss that. I really love horror from the 70s. And I just sort of miss that formulaic haunted house or demon or ghost that, that starts out very small and ends up as this, absolutely horrific climax.
Yeah. I fully agree.
Oh, no.
Rebecca McKendry has a horror podcast called Nightmare University. I think they just changed the name, but she had an episode where she was talking about how when things are going awfully in the country, we end up getting really good horror movies, which is why the 70s were so great, because, like you had Vietnam. And I cannot wait to see the horror movies that we get in a couple years because of this nonsense, but it's going to be intense.
I've heard that about, oh, go ahead, Emma.
No, I'm sorry. I was just going to say there's actually one found footage movie called Host that is about this current time and how we connect with ghosts.
The two of you say titles of movies and books, and I'm just like immediately scared. I'm like, Host, this sounds...
Oh, Host is the first ever that I know of horror movie on Zoom. And it's set during like right now. So these friends are having a seance just for something fun to do because they're all quarantined. And the woman who's supposed to guide them through it, I mean, I feel like she was very clear when she said, take this seriously. Don't fuck this up for us. But they didn't. And then she lost internet. So idiots were left to their own devices. And, they opened a door for a demon. And the demon's like, oh, hey, sounds good.
Yeah,
Send it to a breakout room.
I have to interject really quickly. And for a while there, my screen for all of you froze on my screen. And I was like, what's happening? And I couldn't hear you, and you weren't moving. And I'm like, it's a horror movie.
Found footage.
It's funny we were talking about Host when that happened because exactly.
You froze like,
yeah.
What happened?
I think it was the episode with Lisa, but like my image froze just for me. And you guys could still hear me, and I could see you and hear you, and you were all moving, but my face was stuck and it was awful.
Oh, man. Well, anything else general horror discussion related before we move on to the recommendations? Anything else we wanted to discuss? Oh, Kelly, you didn't say what your favorite adaptation was.
I have a whole bunch, but I just reread Misery. And I need to rewatch the movie, but the movie is so good. And so, I mean, and obviously it's, speaking of settings that are just as much a part of the movie, like most of it is Paul Sheldon in a room with Annie Wilkes, the nurse who is theoretically saved his life and who is actually a literal insane person. And it's the book is also going to be a recommendation in a second, but I think as avid readers, there's a lot more of Annie Wilkes in us maybe than we would like to admit, certainly in me. Because, I mean, would I say kidnap somebody and make them do a sequel? I mean, probably not, but I see the appeal, is what I'm saying. And I think maybe the fact that you wouldn't do it is what makes you an okay, not Annie Wilkes person, but I sympathize is all I'm saying.
I do remember that I tweeted recently, I just realized some of my favorite authors probably have manuscripts in a drawer somewhere that are books that will never see the light of day. And that makes me really sad. And Kelly reminded me that that's like the first step towards becoming Annie Wilkes. Like, yeah.
Okay, I mean, Bridget Kemmerer, who has the third book in her series out in January, I'm pretty sure she has young kids, so you could probably babysit.
Well, she's the one that prompted me to say that, I think. She tweeted something about a book that she shopped around and it never got picked up. And I'm just like, what is it? I want it. Email it to me. I'll read it.
You can self-publish on Amazon. Anyone can do it. Anyone can do it. And I just want to stress again, I'm saying babysit the kids, not kidnap the kids. I'm not deranged.
Sure. Okay. Speaking of great books, so now Emma and Kelly are going to each recommend a few books for horror fans, or maybe if you're new to the genre. So Emma, we'll start with you. So I'm curious if you have a book that's like good for someone who doesn't typically read horror like me.
Okay, so in that case, I'm going to go with, there's an Australian author. Her name is Darcy Coates. She writes a lot of haunted house pieces, but they're not, they have happy endings. So I thought if you don't want to be too scared, I'm going to recommend The Haunting of Ashburn House. She is a really good writer. I am typically disappointed in the endings, but for people who are looking for something like a little more uplifting, a little brighter, I'm definitely any of her books, but I'm going to go with The Haunting of Ashburn House because I think it has more scares within it. And it's definitely, if you just want, a Halloween piece, something for Halloween, but you don't want to get too freaked out.
Right.
I think that's a good one.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, I guess I wouldn't mind being scared along the way as long as it doesn't leave me with like a lingering nightmare. That's my thing. I don't want nightmares. All right, Kelly, you're next.
Okay, so I think I talked about this a week or two ago, but my first one is Someone's Inside Your House by Stephanie Perkins. And it is essentially a romantic comedy mixed with Scream. And the first half is mostly romantic comedy with like a little bit of scary stuff. And then by the end, it is a hardcore slasher movie. Like, people are dying, tons of blood. Like Randy said in Scream, it's carnage candy. But it's very fun, and it's scary, but I don't, well, depending I guess on your horror tolerance, it's scary, but it's not, oh, I woke up at 3 a.m. and now I have to go to the bathroom, but I can't get out of bed because there might be something in the dark with me scary.
Okay,
so
Emma, back to you. What about like a favorite of yours?
My favorite, I'm going to recommend The Collected Ghost Stories of M.R. James, which has a ton of his short stories. I definitely want to emphasize, if you only read one, Canon Alberic scrapbook, or maybe A Warning to the Curious.
Cool. I love a good short story collection.
Yeah, I really, really do as well. And I guess all-time favorite, I've read and reread M.R. James. Like I reread it every couple of years, all his stories, because there's just something so, I don't know, spooky about the way he writes and these sort of like dark, endless curses that never die kind of thing.
Oh my gosh. Does he mostly write short stories or novels
He
as well?
he wrote short stories, and there are definitely a ton of them.
Mm-hmm.
I think the collected ghost stories of M.R. James will give you a really good sampling, and it has kind of his best work in there.
Okay, great. Kelly, favorite, all-time favorite.
I don't know. You can't make me choose.
Just pick one. Doesn't have to be the one.
Right.
Okay, I'm going to regret this later, but I'm going to stick with Stephen King, who is my favorite horror author and my favorite author. I'm going to go with The Shining, because everybody loves the movie. I don't, and the book is so much better. You see this family they've had problems. They've come out on the other side, and they take this horrible job. At least it would be horrible for me, but Jack and his wife Wendy and their young son are in this hotel caretaking for the summer. And they know once it starts to snow, they're stuck. They're there until spring because it's in the mountains of Colorado. And it's like, you're not going to be able to get out. And you're too far from town to walk. You would die. So, if you need to get out, you have to do it soon. They don't. And it also happens that the son is psychic. And if you are a psychic person, that is the worst place to be because many awful things happened in that hotel.
Mm-hmm.
Really, almost nothing but horrible things have happened at that hotel. And it manages to basically terrify Danny, the little boy, and slowly start to turn Jack insane. And in the movie, where he's played by Jack Nicholson, he's insane the entire time. I mean, he's Jack Nicholson going full Jack Nicholson. So it's not really scary because, he doesn't lose his mind. It's been gone. But in the book, you see it happening by inches. You see like the hotel just kind of fracturing this family. And it's so good and so intense. And for someone like me who hates winter and hates snow, even though it's this giant, very luxurious hotel, it feels so claustrophobic because, there's only so many places you can be. And if one of the two other people in there with you has lost his mind, it's really only a matter of time until he finds you. So so good, so scary, and just so sad because they needed a job, and that was what they had, but it destroyed them. And the sequel, Dr. Sleep, is good too. The movie is also good.
And you said you much prefer the book to the movie of The Shining. And is that the one? I think we talked about it on our adaptations episode, but didn't Stephen King also say like he was unhappy with the movie?
Yeah.
Often and loudly. Yeah.
Okay.
He hates it. And
Ugh.
I agree. And one of the things he said about it is if you need to know the real difference, and this is paraphrasing what he said, in the book, the Overlook Hotel freezes, and in the movie it burns. And that's basically the difference because,
wow.
Yeah.
I
think I had that backwards. Yeah. In the movie there's freezing, and then in the book it's burning.
Oh, okay.
And the movie is just, it's a very cold movie. It's really not passionless. I mean, it's really about passionless, and it feels like a farce in parts of it. I don't know what Stanley Kubrick was going for, but it did not work for me. But a lot of people loved it, so.
Yeah, that's a very popular movie. Okay, Emma, can you give us one more recommendation?
Yes, I would like to recommend Paul Tremblay's A Head Full of Ghosts. This is not for the faint of heart, and it's very dark. So just want to recommend, if you're already a horror fan and you haven't read that, I would probably not recommend it to new horror readers.
Got it. Not writing that one down.
Head full of ghosts.
Head full of ghosts.
It's excellent. It's devastating and creepy, and just like this was a book, when I picked it up, I could not put it down. I remember like going to work and I'm like reading it on the light rail on every break I have, and then I'm going home and like I can't wait to finish reading it. It is exceptional, and it's a modern day possession piece.
Oh gosh. Okay. All right.
So good. So good. He has a new one called Survivor Song that I haven't read yet. I don't know if you have, Emma. It looks good.
I have not read that one yet.
And oh, you know, I'm actually gonna piggyback off of yours, and mine will be A Cabin at the End of the World by Paul Tremblay, which it's probably easier to read than A Head Full of Ghosts. But okay, here's the super brief synopsis. A couple and their young daughter are at this cabin in the middle of nowhere for vacation. A couple people come to the door and say, you know, the world's gonna end. We're gonna have to kill you. And that will prevent the end of the world.
Oh.
And it's so deeply unsettling. And everything Paul Tremblay does is so good. And it's another one where the setting is just as important, because it's like, how do you survive when there are people who definitely seem legitimately insane in your house, and they want you to die, and they think your death will bring, you know, avoid the end of the world. I mean, avoiding an apocalypse, I think we can all say that would be a good thing, but it's like, I'm gonna need some hard proof before it's like, well, sure, yeah, you can kill us. That sounds great. But yeah, so good and so unpredictable. Because I did think I knew where the story would go, and I just no idea.
I mean, frankly, I'm just going to take everyone down with me.
Yeah.
Right.
There's an apocalypse coming. I'm dying anyway.
Yeah. That's true.
Okay, those all sound creepy and scary. So I think we've got some good recommendations. Thanks so much, Emma, for joining us. This is great.
Thank you. I really enjoyed being here.
Yeah. Where can people find you or follow you and make sure they're notified about your book coming out?
Okay, I have a website, emmabevins.wordpress.com. I have a Facebook page, All Things Horror, and though I haven't been using it, I have Instagram, author Emma Beaven, so I will try to use that.
Get on that Bookstagram. Great. Well, thanks again.
All right. Thank you so much, Julia.
All right. Thank you again to Emma Beaven for joining us. Listeners, you can follow us on social media at WYSR_podcast on Instagram and on Twitter. You can find us on YouTube, and you can follow us on Goodreads at What You Should Read Podcast. If you'd like to email us, our email is whatyousshouldreadpodcast@gmail.com. Don't forget that we are filming our first book club episode on December 6th. The episode will drop on December 8th. So if you'd like to submit any questions or thoughts on the book, please email us before December 6th. And the book is The Book of Two Ways by Jodi Picoult. So we'll be discussing that book for our first book club episode. And give us a rating and a review. We'd appreciate it.
And now you know what you should read.
You're welcome.
That's stressful.